Meetings, I would ask that if you have a cell phone, either turn it off or silence it so we aren't interrupted. Jerry. So, we're ready to go. Today is Tuesday, September 8th. This is the regular work session for the City Commission of Oregon City. We have concluded our executive session, convened the work session and call the roll. Ms. Riggs?
Commissioner Shaw?
Here.
Commissioner Pauly?
Here.
Commissioner Smith?
Here.
Commissioner Mangelberg?
Here.
And Mayor Holliday.
Here. So, does anybody have any future agenda items? Hearing none, we'll move on. First item is the 1549 City County Insurance Services presentation by Adrian Albrecht, Human Resources Director Jim Leffler. Hope I got the name right.
Good evening, Mayor and Commission. Tonight I'd like to present Adrian Albrecht from CIS. He's here to save us money. Not often do we get an insurance company that's able to say that, other than maybe Geico. But just by watching this 14-minute video, the city will get a $1,000 credit for its 2016-17 renewal with CIS. They currently have a bonus program that we can qualify up to $5,000, which what we're working on. So, you know,
That doesn't mean we have to watch this 5 times, does it?
No, sir. No. Unless you want to. So now we're trying to get this credit. Nancy Ide, who's still working for us as our risk manager, and myself and Adrian are kind of like the team. And at this point, we'd like you to watch the video. If you have any questions for Adrian afterwards, he's feel free. He'll be here. And that's it.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Lynn McNamara, Executive Director of CIS, City County Insurance Services. If you're an elected official in one of CIS's member cities or counties, you probably think of us as your insurance company. But what you may not know is CIS is much, much more. In this program, we'll acquaint you with our mission and talk about how CIS can help your entity protect its financial and human resources. CIS is, first and foremost, a service program of the League of Oregon Cities and Association of Oregon Counties, and has been since 1981. Here to talk about the relationship of CIS to LOC and AOC are AOC's Executive Director Mike MacArthur and LOC's Executive Director Mike McCauley.
City County Insurance Services, or CIS, was created by AOC and LOC to provide services to our members.
In the late 70s, commercial insurers were exiting the market, and if insurance was available, it was at very high rates. The League of Oregon Cities and the Association of Oregon Counties formed CIS in 1981 to address that grave concern of cities and counties that insurance was either unaffordable or unavailable.
CIS is governed by a board of 10 trustees. 5 of those trustees are selected by the Board of Directors of the Association of Oregon Counties. 5 are selected by the Board of Directors of the League of Oregon Cities. Each of those organizations also selects its executive director to serve on the Board of Trustees. So the governance is by the members.
CIS exists for cities and counties in a similar fashion that AOC and LOC were formed so that cities and counties could collectively be stronger.
Not a traditional insurance company. It's a pool. Therefore, it's owned by the members. The members share the risk. The members share the rewards. So we are more sensitive to the needs of our members, and we are not looking to make a profit for our shareholders.
Since CIS is a collective of the cities and counties coming together, one city's actions or one county's actions will affect the financial stability or rating for all of the cities and counties. So to the degree that losses are reduced, all cities and counties benefit. Conversely, if a city or a county experiences a severe loss, the collective will also absorb the impact of the loss.
One of the differences with CIS is our efforts to try and avoid claims. CIS prides itself on managing risk.
Risk management really is at the heart of everything we do at CIS. As an elected official, you may not think of yourself as a risk manager, but you have an important risk management role to play. We asked Tualatin Mayor and CIS trustee Lou Ogden to talk about how CIS works for cities and counties and what CIS means for elected officials.
CIS is unique in that the Board of Trustees are elected and appointed officials from cities and counties. The insurance markets fluctuate. They fluctuate based upon their costs, based upon their profits, their losses, and it's usually over a fairly large geographic spans. But through CIS, we're able to actually control our costs because they are the costs that our members incur. And so the Board of Trustees is committed to trying to smooth rates as much as possible. We're able to do that because when we do have good years, we have cash that we can use to sort of smooth and subsidize the rates in the years where maybe there are higher losses. But it comes back to the fact that the CIS member-driven effort is to help educate entities on how to minimize risk, how to reduce losses. They provide that service, that touch, as well as that tech, so that we can keep our losses under control. And then again, the Board of Directors is concerned about the impacts to their own cities and counties, so we care very much that we smooth those rates as much as possible. We're not driven, we're not subject to the market fluctuations that the broad insurance industry is subject to. I think it's important for elected officials to understand that CIS is not just an insurance company. In fact, it's not an insurance company at all. CIS is an entity that supports cities. It's comprised of cities. There's actually three things to keep in mind as we think about CIS. Number one, the rates need to be and are competitive. We shop our rates, we make sure that they match the market. More importantly, CIS provides services to cities to help control costs, to help educate our staff, educate our elected officials, educate our employees. We provide that ability for us to manage our own costs and our own risks. But beyond that, CIS is a group of cities and counties coming together to support each other by participating in the pool. City of Tualatin actually has, I believe, all the coverages that are available through CIS. We have our liability, we have property, we have auto physical damage, we have benefits, that is medical, dental, we have long-term disability, we have a workers' comp. And why do we have all of our coverages with CIS? Well, for a number of reasons. First of all, they're competitive in all those lines. We actually have shopped all those and found that CIS has been competitive, if not lower cost. Secondly, there's value in having all of our coverages with one entity. We have the known folks that we deal with. We're not dealing with underwriters or adjusters on the other side of the continent. We're dealing with folks that are part of our organization. And the other component of it goes back to the fact that we support the entity that supports us.
Here at CIS, we think the best claim is the one that never happens. And so the majority of our services are aimed at helping you prevent claims. Here to talk about how elected officials can avoid some common liability problems is Baker County Commission Chair and CIS trustee Fred Warner.
The elected officials make up a council or a commission, and that is where the real authority lies with local government. If you have issues with employees, it would be up to the entire council or the commission. CIS, we see claims where individual elected officials take personnel matters or they speak for the council when they don't have that authority, and those are just claims waiting to happen. Well, remember, as an elected official, social media can be an important tool, but you should always refrain from putting your organization's business and any negative thoughts into your social media. It will come back to haunt you, and you are held to a higher standard, and that's something that all elected officials should remember. When we have a claim, CIS is our partner. They go out of their way to try to keep us from having claims by having pre-loss legal, by doing trainings like we're doing today to help us avoid claims. They are our partners in our risk management.
Fred brought up a good point. Elected officials are held to a higher standard and their actions are often scrutinized. In fact, elected officials make so many decisions that claims are more likely. Managing risk of this type can feel like a minefield, especially if you're new. To help you deal with some of those mines, here are some best practices that we can offer. Know all you can about the legal limits on your responsibilities and authority. Understand the laws about the conduct of public entity business. And finally, when faced with a decision that is difficult, particularly an HR issue, consult with CIS Pre-Loss Legal. It's free and here to support our cities and counties. Your local insurance agent is another great resource for elected officials. Here is Ken Wood, CIS trustee and a longtime insurance agent for cities and counties, to explain how an agent can help you.
Well, as an elected official, I would hope our insurance agent of record would be a resource for the city management team in making sure that things are properly covered. And if there's a risk, we try to see how we can cover it or reduce the risk. But I would hope there'd be a valuable staff resource for the city management team. Your insurance agent should provide an evaluation of exposures for your entity, coverage design, and pricing alternatives. Public risks have unique and different exposures compared to individuals or private businesses. Your insurance agent should be responsible to advocate for your entity's needs and best interest. Most insurance agents should participate in the executive risk management decisions of your city or county, set priorities, and help make recommendations.
As Ken pointed out, agents are there to be the expert on your exposures and also an advocate for your entity. Make the most of their services. We'd also suggest that you make the most of CIS's services and resources for your city or county, most of them available at no cost. Here to talk about CIS's services is CIS trustee and Columbia County Commissioner Earl Fisher.
Well, one of the services that we really think is important is the risk management piece of it, and that is being able to call up and get a risk manager to come out and look at some of the things that we do. Someone to come out and work with our safety committees and to help us look at our safety procedures throughout the entire operation. In addition to helping you identify risks or problems that you might have in your organization, it also provides some grant money to then address those very issues that you have identified. And I think that's extremely important, particularly those of us in the government side of the work, to be able to know that there's some funding out there to help take care of those problems that have been identified. Another service that I think is really important is best practices. There's lots of things that county government can get involved in, but one of the things we really need to make sure we do is that we're doing the things that are the best practices for our community and for our employees. I think the pre-loss services are really important to have. To be able to pick up the telephone and call an attorney before you make that decision concerning an employment problem. One of the areas that I think CIS helps us a great deal in, that is dealing with our employees, not only after we've hired them, but even beforehand. To be able to do the pre-hiring reviews, to look at our policies that we have in terms of hiring, to go back and examine those to make sure that we're doing the right things, asking the right questions, doing the right research, so that we avoid issues in the future because we made the right decision to begin with. One of the other programs CIS has is a return to work program. When an employer or employee is off for whatever reason, CIS will work with his doctor and a case manager to find the best way and the most appropriate way to bring the employee back. And that's important for the employer from the standpoint of saving some funding. But it's also important to the employee to be able to know that he's being well handled and treated, and most of the time they're really eager to get back to work, and we're not rushing him, but he knows he's coming back in a good environment. CIS also provides a number of online courses. Those of us who have to be concerned about things like making sure that you've had the right classes to take care of risk management, that you've had the OSHA requirements met, those sorts of classes can be done online. In addition, for those of you who are like me, somewhat technologically challenged, we can also go online and find some of those more soft type of classes that teach us how to turn on the computer. You can find all of these at the CIS Learning Center online. One of the other things that CIS provides is a really excellent conference. And during that, they provide numbers of workshops. I would really encourage public officials to be there. There's various tracks. For example, they have one on law enforcement, which is extremely important and informative. On risk management, there's an opportunity to learn with your peers about the ways that we can make a more effective and efficient operation in our public service.
We appreciate the wisdom of the elected officials who serve on the CIS Board of Trustees and hope their advice, combined with CIS's resources and services, will help you achieve your community's goals. For spending time with us today, your entity will receive a bonus, a discount on next year's CIS liability contribution. Thanks for joining your fellow Oregon cities and counties in being a member of CIS.
So never write anything down you don't want to see on a courtroom wall.
That's really a good point. And I'm the risk management consultant for the city of Oregon City. So if there's anything that any of you folks need, you can contact Jim or Katie or Nancy, and they can get a hold of me. And Katie has some of my business cards as well.
Great.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
So next we have PC 15-202, Myers Road Extension Quarter Plan, Mr. Lewis.
I'll start anyway.
Okay.
So just want to take a minute. So thank you for your time. We're hoping to bring before you at your next meeting an actual reading of this adoption of this plan. It's been through the Planning Commission, and I've been through a lot of public involvement. And so that's why we're here today, just to bring you up to speed with what's going on with the Myers Road.
Was it unanimous at the Planning Commission?
I believe it was.
Okay.
Yeah. So I guess I'd like to start with Martin's at the back of the room. He's not presenting, but Martin has taken this project. I kind of opened a can of worms and didn't do a very good job managing it. Martin picked that up and has delivered with the help of these two gentlemen here. Mike Hickey, who's with David Evans and Associates, and John Replinger. So it's been a good team and a good process, and had a lot of public involvement. Seems like a pretty straightforward project, but we don't build new roads very often. So getting a concept plan for Myers Road is yet another concept plan in our pocket to be able to rely on for future funding or just implementation. So this project is really a partnership through Clackamas Community College and Oregon City School District. The three agencies all partnered together to bring forth this concept plan and help cover the cost of developing the concept plan. So I feel like there's been a lot of collaborative energy. We've had the school district and the community college, as well as some of those other agencies you might think might be involved in a project like this, at the table for just about every one of our project meetings. So with that, this is part of the legislative approval process, and we just want to bring that to you in a few, hopefully 15 minutes or less. So with that, Mike, I'll turn it over to you.
John, I'll just give you step you through the PowerPoint presentation here pretty quickly. So we put together a team to collaborate on the different designs for the road to get basically from High School Avenue to Oregon to or 213. We did outreach to all the property owners, general public, neighborhood associations. We came up with a concept plan and analyzed it to make sure it would work. This is a diagram from the transportation system plan. That the line that goes horizontal there was the initial layout for the Myers Road, and then the other dashed line that comes down and intersects in the middle there was Loader Road. This diagram shows basically kind of the extents. The black line on the bottom is where we looked at kind of the farthest south that the road would go, and the purple line is kind of the farthest north it would go. And then we looked at a range of alternatives that was in this vicinity. This is the overall project area that we looked at. Our outreach, like John said, we partnered with the school district, Clackamas Community College. We also worked with TriMet, ODOT, the Planning Commission, Natural Resources, Parks Department, and they were all part of a project team to develop the range of alternatives. This shows the bus facility, which is currently under final plans and about to be built, and we hooked onto the west end of it and worked with them to develop our alignment, so to make sure that we were in agreement with what they were doing. And we did a traffic analysis based on 5 different locations, and John can talk about more in depth about the analysis.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, certainly part of the transportation system plan had identified the Myers Road corridor as being an important one. We used this project as an opportunity to get into it a little bit further, to refine it, to make sure we knew exactly what size was going to be required. We needed to have information about the traffic, so we got the appropriate design for each of the intersections, which translates into the right-of-way needs. We analyzed 5 different intersections, 3 of them on Highway 213. Of course, all of those are currently signalized intersections going from north to south, Malala, Myers, and Glen Oak Caulfield. Analyzed all of those. Intersection number 2 at Myers Road, of course, is a T intersection today, and what we learned through the analysis is that we'll need to be very similar to the existing intersection of Malala and 213 in the future. It'll need 3 lanes in each direction for left through and right on Myers Road. It'll need an additional northbound through lane on Highway 213. None of it's a real surprise, but it was really important that we do the analysis to nail that down as we move forward with the project. We also learned through the analysis that the connection to the Clackamas Community College will work fine as a stop control intersection with a stop sign for the intersection with the community college. Intersection number 5, the new expectation now is that Loader Road will not skirt around the west side of the bus facility and through the environmentally sensitive area, but instead Loader Road will come down and intersect currently where Myers Road and High School is. And that will also operate fine as a all-way stop control intersection. We use the same analysis year 2035 as in the transportation system plan. Unlike the transportation system plan, we analyzed both the morning peak hour and the PM peak hour conditions, and we came up with a satisfactory answer that will meet the mobility standards. Conclusions from the traffic analysis. I guess I should have jumped to this before I told you the conclusions, but we're all good. The bottom line is acceptable operations through year 2035.
And that's without the Loader Road extension.
We assumed the Loader Road extension would occur, and it probably function acceptably with or without Loader Road. The Loader Road extension probably has more of an impact on the operations of the intersection of Beaver Creek Road and Myers, rather than on Myers Road itself. Good question, sir. In terms of Myers Road extension, as Mike said, it connects it's a new section of roadway. The extension will have the effect of at least temporarily reducing the amount of traffic on Glen Oak Road and should provide a bit of relief on that. Some of the features with this are again, going along with the transportation system plan, it's important to be a multimodal corridor. So this includes buffered bike lanes and 4-foot sidewalk.
I thought it said 6-foot sidewalks.
I'm sorry. Yeah, absolutely. 6-foot sidewalk. The footprint is narrow so as to minimize the taking of property. Parking was not included on the north side, but was included on the south side throughout the length of the project. Part of the focus of parking on the south side was to provide access to the planned Glen Oak Park. Design speed that was used for this project was 30 miles per hour, again in part to emphasize safety in the corridor where there's a lot of school traffic, and to help minimize the takings and in terms of the right-of-way width and how it impacted the property owners. The project does not include a roundabout at any of the locations. We considered that. The transportation system plan did identify an intersection, the intersection of Loader and Myers as a roundabout. That is not part of the current plan. It does include access to the Clackamas Community College at the south end, and it improves connections with Highway 213, and it does allow development of the industrial corridor. Both sides of Myers Road are designated for industrial, and we did assume 1,000 industrial jobs in that Myers Road and Loader Road corridor so as to test to make sure that our traffic assumptions were valid.
John, before you go on there, you were talking about it does reduce traffic on Glen Oak. What does it do to Beaver Creek Road?
It does not have very much effect on Beaver Creek Road. The greatest effect is going to be on Glen Oak Road.
Okay.
Beaver Creek Road is expected to have rather considerable traffic increases as we see development in the south part of Oregon City and in Clackamas County. There's very much a northbound in the morning, southbound in the afternoon orientation. That's expected to continue, though with the development of industrial jobs in this area, there's some hopes that there will not be as many people traveling through the city from the south.
That'd be good. And lastly, too, you said that the footprint is narrow now. Last I looked, it was like 90 feet.
Right. Well, that's narrow because we did have some people suggesting from the beginning that it might need to be a 5-lane section.
So it's better.
So it's not 3 lanes is narrower than 5.
Okay.
So, yeah, but yes, good question. It does seem to be pretty wide. We do have the 6-foot sidewalks. There are the Green Street planter swale for managing the water, buffered bike lanes, and 1 through lane in each direction, and either a center turn lane or medians with plantings.
Yeah, it's going to be one of the nicer streets in Oregon City, I think.
Right.
Isn't it?
We don't have anything comparable right
Yeah,
now,
really.
I don't
Yeah,
think.
kind of set the template for the rest of the city, John. Nice going.
Well, we heard from the Planning Commission that they were interested in seeing a higher standard. So buffered bike lanes would be a new thing for Oregon City, but you're seeing them in other jurisdictions pretty regularly. So I don't think that we've set the I mean, this isn't this isn't the Cadillac version. This is something less than that, but I still think it would be one of the better streets for the city.
It's a good place for it by the school.
Yeah.
So along those lines, is the footprint that you're proposing here consistent with the rest of the connection that reaches out to Beaver Creek Road?
It is consistent with, but not the same. As John mentioned, the buffered bike lanes is something new. The median with plantings in it would be consistent. I think the lane widths are similar. It's a little bit different, but it is consistent.
So it's really designed more to accommodate the industrial traffic that is anticipated adjacent?
It's a combination, yes. It is designated as a local industrial truck street in the transportation system plan. So we did certainly account for that, and we did consider what the width of the lanes would be. So we do think that we've abided by the transportation system plan rules of making it consistent with Truck Street, with a service to the industrial, and with a multimodal facility. So we think we've done a good compromise, and part of including all of the participants in the process was to make sure that everyone's needs were clearly identified from the beginning.
Thank you.
This slide shows preferred alignment. This was actually the fourth iteration that we went through when we studied the various alignments, and this has actually turned out to be a hybrid alignment of one of the top three that was picked out.
One of the main goals that I wanted to mention was we were trying to leave a lot of land available for jobs. And so that, those red squares represent power line through that property. So they already kind of dice that up a little bit.
Right.
And then trying to provide access to the community college, but still leave property owners as whole as we can. I mean, we've got some nice big parcels out there. Eric Underwood tells me that there's development potential out there that could bring, a fair amount of jobs. So we wanted to keep those large because we don't have many of those that are shovel ready. This project, when built, would include water and sewer and all the other utilities with it as well. So, and the community college seems pretty happy with it, and it does have some impact to some trees, but we tried to minimize that as much as we could.
Just an offside question, but in the upper left corner, just next to the 213, there's kind of a big oval thing. What is that?
Oh, you mean on the existing?
Yeah.
Right there. I don't know if you can see my pointer. But
no, yeah.
I think there's some ATV or some kind of track.
I thought it was a crop circle.
You can see we left that intact. So, so the purple dotted line is also another feature that we incorporated as a multi-use path that we basically connected where we were bisecting the community college's path there. And so we upgraded that and to where bicyclists and pedestrians can get away from the roadway, use that path. There's the typical section that was developed through the alternatives analysis and then meeting with the Planning Commission. One of the things they wanted to see was lots of vegetation in the corridor, and so included some larger trees in the center and then some planting where we can on the sides. We can't plant a consistent row of trees through that because it is a water quality swale, so it won't support trees in all locations, but they thought it was important to put in as many trees as we could.
Didn't realize there was parking on there. Which side is the park?
Parking on the south side.
South side.
South side?
Yes.
So that's where the park is, I think.
Yeah, since the park is on that side, encourages people to park on that side and keeps them from crossing the street, so that would maximize safety. There's 7 different projects that were affected. We looked at all the projects that were affected as part of the transportation system plan and made sure we were consistent in addressing all those. And I won't go through them all in detail. So very soon, the bus facility will be built, and then we expect it'll be several years before we can build the rest of this road. We need to have funding, which the city is now pursuing through various, I think, probably every possible way it can. And hopefully we'll be successful on that within the next 5 years or so. Thoughts or questions?
Probably too early to say, but roughly what would the cost of a facility like this be to the city eventually at build-out?
Well, the construction cost will be somewhere in $3-4 million range.
Jeez. That's almost nothing.
$3-4 million. You have that, John. What's going on?
You know, that's a great question, and one that you go through all this work, and at the end of the day, you kind of want a number, right, to go with. But I think a lot of it depends. It's interesting how this federal money works. Sometimes it costs you quite a bit of money in administration just to kind of get the project going. So if we could fund it locally, I think it would be outstanding for the city to be able to do that. And I think the community college is driven. We've heard from the Evergreen development out off Beaver Creek Road that they're ready to move forward, that they were conditioned to contribute to this project. We do have transportation SDCs that we could use for that. So, and you know, hopefully we can work with the property owners on property dedication, because if this road is built, it makes their property much more shovel ready and valuable. So it again feels like, you know, this collaborative energy has some momentum, and it'd be nice to move forward with it relatively quickly. If we have to wait, you know, the programming for federal funding or even state funding is out there several years, and with the bus barn coming into place, I think I can tell you the neighborhood's ready to see it go through. So, you know, $3.5-4 million, you know, isn't a lot of money when you're thinking about a new roadway like this, especially one that connects to a facility like Highway 213. So, yeah, I think it's doable. We'll probably be coming back to you with some recommendations for moving forward with right-of-way acquisition, so we can get that kind of checked off the box, and design, and just keep this ball rolling.
Well, I can tell you that having had 3 kids go through the high school, that another way to get out of the high school at either, you know, morning or afternoon, this would be a huge pressure relief valve for that facility, because you know, it's, if you're in the back lot, it can take you half an hour, 40 minutes to get out, you know, after school is over. So, you know, I think that's a big thing, and I assume that once we build this out, that as the industrial properties develop, that some of that cost would be reapportioned in the development process. Is that right?
You mean through system development charges or conditions of approval?
Right.
Yes, that's true.
So you shook your head yes, and Tony shook his head no, so I'm confused.
I guess, you know, of course there'll be system development charges that would be applicable to any development that came in there. I guess I was thinking more of like in a reimbursement district or a local improvement district, and I don't think we're planning to do that at this point.
So normally if somebody's developing something and they would have to do a half-street improvement, but if the street is already there and all that's done, there's no cost apportioned to them other than the system development charges.
Correct.
Okay.
Unless there's a reimbursement district or another avenue, but if it's built.
Which isn't off the table either. I don't think that's off the table. We haven't talked about that far yet, but.
I mean, obviously, you know, the property owners might consider something along those lines, because the sooner it gets done, the more valuable their property is, and the sooner it can get marketed. So,
and I think there could be part of the discussion of how much the right-of-way acquisition is. I mean, there's, I think, multiple things that could go into the negotiation of that.
Okay.
Well, that's the other part too, is that you got $3.5 to $4 million to construct this thing. That doesn't include right-of-way acquisition, so that could be more. So.
It really is, yeah.
Just so there's no sticker shock here, guys, you know.
Well,
Okay.
you gotta have a plan first, and this looks like a good plan to get things going and get the funding, and I think it was well thought through. It was unanimous by the planning commission, is that correct?
Martin will remember. It was, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't remember hearing any outliers, so, yeah.
Well, just the fact of
I mean, they're
connecting
up
the
there.
college and the high school in 213 and hitting all those points, I think is really important, so,
Okay.
good job.
Everybody done?
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm at the packet. Close. Close. Okay, so 3C is 15-490, vehicular access for Dutch Brothers Coffee located at 1002 Main Street. And by the request of the property owner, I am suspending the rule, and we're going to let the property owner speak to us tonight as we have this discussion.
Sounds good. You want that to happen before or after then?
Hmm?
You want that before or after the staff report?
Why don't you go ahead and give a staff report?
So, Katie, if you can.
Yep.
So, do we have a presentation? Sort of. We've got some slides, some pictures, and. Thank you, Katie. So, again, thank you for taking the time to hear this topic. So, we're talking about the Dutch Brothers located at 10th and Main. The actual address is 1002 Main Street. The issue is customer traffic that uses Dutch Brothers often, at times, exceeds their capacity to be able to serve. Not all the time, but at times. And when that happens, we see congestion on 10th Street in both directions. So 10th Street is a two-lane minor arterial that serves as the through route to central Oregon City. There's not too many ways to get to the top of the hill, and this is one of them, so it gets a lot of traffic. 10th Street currently has no on-street parking. And the issues are when that capacity to serve is exceeded by Dutch Brothers, and they basically back up and have a pretty big impact to 10th Street. So one of our staff here at the city happened to catch this picture, which is kind of what many of you have seen from times where we see it happen. Sometimes there's backed up traffic due to 99E as well. So I don't want to paint, but this picture, clearly we weren't having that particular problem. Dutch Brothers is doing their best to serve. I think we're going to hear from Abe here, but they have servers that come out in their driveway and try to take those orders as quick as they can. But once in a while, you get a driver who's really not thinking about the oncoming traffic that moves out and can't get in their parking lot. And when that happens, again, we've got some good warning systems on 10th Street that were installed around 2010. We had some flashing lights and things that tell you, don't stop on the tracks. In this case here, this driver got across the tracks and didn't realize, his truck got across, but his trailer didn't, right? So that's the kind of indication. And then, this is the same time. It's just a different view. We see a lot of backup in the downhill traffic, some of which is probably headed to Dutch Brothers, but those that aren't are pretty upset about it right now, right? So, so that's really the problem. That backed up traffic combined with the Union Pacific Railroad, which is right there, and we've had. I know in the past we've had incidents of accident where vehicles have stopped on the tracks. So, that's kind of the problem. So this figure is probably too small for you to read, but it came out of we've hired Kittleson Associates in the past. They looked at this problem in 2010. Then in 2013 we hired them to come back and look at it again. And so these bubbles here on the map represent traffic counting that was done at the driveway, both driveways of Dutch Brothers, and at the intersection at 10th and Main. So we don't necessarily have specific traffic volume for this block of 10th Street, but we do have daily volume for 10th Street between 99E and Main Street that was recorded. It's just over 8,000 vehicles a day. This is a busy. It's kind of an amazing intersection to watch. It moves a lot of traffic, and I don't know if John Replinger left, but it's probably one of the busiest four-way intersections that you could get. We also know during the 2013 study that the peak hour max for 10th Street between Main and the tracks is in the PM hour. So typically we see peaks in the AM, but this is in the PM. 11,000 trips during that peak hour, and 34 of those trips we counted going into the Dutch Brothers. So a lot of traffic there. Not as much going into Dutch Brothers, but still a significant amount, especially if you thought about how many vehicles that is per minute moving through there. Any little disruption to that, like a left turn movement into Dutch Brothers, really kind of raises a little bit of havoc. And we've heard, you hear horns, you hear yelling, we hear it at TAC meetings and city commissions meetings, so we hear it in various forms, and I get the frustration there. But as I said, in 2010 we completed those railroad safety improvements, and I think they've been helpful. But what do we do now? So in this study, there's actually more than two options. I'm going to show you the two options that I think the city has the ability to implement. And one of them is what I think most people kind of have drawn the conclusion is the best solution, which is some kind of a median that would prevent that left turn if you're essentially heading up Singer Hill. Those vehicles that want to turn left into Dutch Brothers, prohibiting that with a structure, something like a curb with maybe some what we call delineators or the candlestick kind of features. It's too narrow to build like a landscape median, for instance, because even though that median there is shown is a little bit wider, might handle some landscaping. I really don't think it's the right place for that. But this would also, we'd work with Dutch Brothers for some different striping and make it definitely one way in, which is pretty much how people are using it now. It's just, stripe that such that it holds a fair amount of the most storage that they can do with the building where it's at right now. The other thing that I like to point out is the Main Street entrance for Dutch Brothers is unconventional in that people exit on what would be if you're heading out of the driveway, it's on the left side, and so vehicles coming in have to enter on the other side, which is not conventional. So it's just not great. But the other thing is it's fairly close to Main Street. So one of the concerns that I have is just the impacts of something like this may force more people onto the Main Street entrance, and even if a vehicle could maneuver on site to do a U-turn to get through the drive-through, that may have other repercussions that I tend to worry about. And really, one of the reasons why I haven't done much about trying to move this initiative forward. But the other piece that I like about this solution is we've been talking a little bit about quiet zone in downtown, and one of the requirements for a quiet zone on a crossing like this is that you have a deterrent or a preventative that prevents vehicles from even, it seems odd, but going into the oncoming lane to drive around the stops, the railroad arms. And my sense is that happens a lot more in rural areas, but I think that's the standard by which they would require Oregon City to live by. So they probably want to see some kind of median barrier, or at least pylons on really both legs of on the uphill side of the tracks and the downhill side.
Happens all the time in Canby.
Yeah,
all the time.
It happens. People do it. So, I'd really hate to see it happen here. The sight distance is pretty poor here. I think in those areas where you have a railroad crossing where you've got good enough sight distance to see how far the train is, you might take advantage of that. Or you wouldn't. No, you wouldn't. Somebody might. The other alternative that kind of provides some solutions to this, which was actually the recommendation from the transportation analysis, was to provide a turn pocket by widening 10th Street there in a way that people are already kind of doing. They're maneuvering around The problem with this one as it is today, I don't think it's just a striping project, because the crown of the road is such that it falls off, and then you got vehicles heading into pedestrian zones, and then you kind of line, once you're moved over to get around that parked vehicle making the left, you're kind of pointed right at the railroad arm crossing, and it's not really safely delineated in a way that people know what, people know this because they use it. But if we were going to build something, if we were going to go out there and put our stamp approval on it, we'd want to do it right. And that, to me, has always meant building a new curb on the undeveloped side of the property, getting that road cross section such that you're not kind of falling off to the
Well, that's going to encroach on that property that's owned by Urban Renewal as well, right?
Well, we're showing it within the existing right of way, but right now their property feels a little bit bigger than it already is. So we weren't planning on taking any additional right of way, but part of me was hoping that when that development came in on that there would be some conditions associated with building some of this infrastructure. So
because we have to remember that striping a road does not necessarily mean that people will follow it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I mean, if you take a path in, say, the community college, and you build a sidewalk, 2 years from now you'll see the places that people actually go versus the sidewalks. And the same thing happens, at the top of Singer Hill and other places. We've got everything striped, but within 6 months of it being painted, you'll see where the cars are actually going versus where the paint is. So, we have to be aware of that. I think one of the big problems that I see right now with the left-hand turn is it only takes 2 cars to stack up going left into Dutch Brothers, going uphill on 10th, to make it impossible for anybody to get by them on the right, or it only takes one hesitant person to not try to go around on the right. And I've been in situations where I've stacked all the way back up on Railroad Avenue 3 blocks back, trying to get around the corner and back down on Main Street to turn right to go up the hill. So I think, that there's a serious issue here we have to deal with.
I have a question about the bike lane stripe that's on I guess it would be the west side. It seems to kind of abut the Urban Renewal property, but then there's no bike lane going up Singer Hill. How many bicyclists actually drive up there, and does that create a false sense of opportunity there?
Yeah, we're not showing a bike lane there. What we're showing is the sidewalk and kind of channelization. You see how the striping, if you're on Main Street heading north and turning onto 10th, how it kind of wows out there. I'm not quite sure why that line ended up there, but I think the idea is to try and channel people in the right direction so that they're moving there. But it's not a bike lane. You're right. We don't have room for bike lanes, and it's not ever going to be considered a bike route.
Typical bikes use the sidewalk on the west side of 10th Singer Hill going up the hill. That's what I've seen. Rarely do you. I mean, there are the occasional devil idiots who ride downhill on 10th Street, either on bicycles or skateboards. But
the
Darwin's rule applies there.
Right.
The bike route is
Washington Street.
I want to say Washington and 14. So that's the designated route. What else do I want to say about these options? Well, I guess I would say we haven't found a great option. That's part of the problem.
Well, because it's a horrible site.
I think it depends on your perspective.
Yeah. I get that. But so from the standpoint of trying to make all our citizens safe, it's a challenging intersection.
It's a constrained site, very much so. But we did allow him to have his business here. So how do we manage this without negatively impacting him too much, but making it safer? So that's the challenge.
And I know Gabe wants to say some things, so I want to get to that. This site is, from my understanding with Tony, we probably wouldn't approve this kind of use now. Drive-throughs in Oregon City in this particular zone aren't allowed. That's another problem. Is we saw some other design alternatives that kind of showed moving the building in a way that could better accommodate the on-site looping that might need to happen if it was just if there was just one access off Main Street. And between the landscaping requirements and just the city's current code, that prohibits drive-through businesses, new drive-through businesses. We've got that other constraint that makes this difficult. So, we've got what we've got there. There's a little bit of room if we expanded, along the neighboring property, the urban renewal property that we own on the other corner. But I can't argue with the fact that it's a very short turn pocket. There would be times, I suspect, when it would be continue to be a problem, as long as Dutch Brothers is successful. Both of those two options, I did an estimate of both the options. The median's probably somewhere in that $15,000 range, just because of the traffic control. And by the way, anytime we work within that close of proximity to the railroad grade, we have to pay for railroad flaggers at $500 a pop a day, whether we're there for 2 hours or all day or not. So I factored some of that in there. And this one here has got a lot more to it. Obviously, we'd probably want to repave all of that block of 10th Street. So I was figuring that one somewhere in that $60,000, $65,000 range. So they're not this one here in particular is not inexpensive. I think if we were to do the median, we'd probably do that with our own forces and get that in place.
So also putting in curbs and sidewalks on the south side of 10th there, because there's no sidewalk there now.
Right. Yeah,
so
that's part of that $65,000 number that I'm looking at.
Okay.
So with that, I can answer questions, or we can let Gabe.
Could we go back to the?
Abe.
Can we go back to the the median design,
Thanks.
please?
You're welcome.
So in that case, if someone desperately wants a cup of coffee, they're going to have to come from Singer Hill, or else they're out of luck if they want Dutch Brothers.
No, they can turn it on off of Main Street.
They will have to plan that ahead of time.
Yeah, the site is so narrow that I think cars have to do kind of that 3-point turn to make that happen on site. And I think Abe's got employees that park along there as well, and there's some walk-up traffic that drive in and do that as well.
Yeah. So there's a couple things that.
Could you identify yourself for the record,
Yes.
please?
Sorry, I'm Abe Minchin-Friend. I'm the owner. Thank you for allowing me to be here. This kind of came up on Friday. It wasn't new to me, obviously. We do a great deal of business down on 10th and Main, and we are one of the fastest locations in our company, so that's great. We do, we get through cars 15 seconds a car. We've put the pedal to the metal, but when you look at the intersection that we're in, it's less than desirable. If we were looking at it as a company right now, we would not approve it ourselves. So, but it is an icon. We've expanded our business. We're double the employees, if not triple. When we started, that location there has 22 employees. Little tiny box, a lot of people. We're in the customer service business. For us, we talk to every person that comes through, and we recognize the strain both on our customers and on people that are just trying to make it up the road. When I looked at the two options that you were presenting, obviously having a median that restricts left turns, I feel would be a huge negative to us. I saw the light in it, how that it obviously it would cause people to exit out of that section. But I also know our customer base and believe they would drive right up the hill, turn around, and come down and end up clogging that intersection. In that photo that you were showing where the van had turned left and there was a truck with a trailer on the tracks and then the cars are up the hill, I believe a median would cause even more of an issue, that they would back up. Kind of like when we opened that store, we had traffic that went up Singer Hill all the way around past 7-Eleven and around the corner. But I think it is a good thing for Oregon City to have a business that people love to come and visit, and that shop specifically has gotten publicity on national television. Undercover Boss, they came out, and I went and did a show, and they spoke of Oregon City being one of the top stores. So I think it's good for the city. I will tell you guys this. I've spent hours and hours scratching my head trying to do anything possible to try to make it better for all of our customers and for just citizens in Oregon City. And so we're literally days away from taking ownership of the old Big Dog Coffee Eden Way building up on the corner. And the entire reason why we were doing that was to alleviate pressure off Main Street. Business-wise, it does absolutely nothing financially for me. It's not, I anticipate removing 30% of our overall gross sales out of that location. And obviously, if you equate what I'll invest into it and the staffing, I will make less profit out of doing that. And the whole reason of doing it, though, is so that we can continue to operate on Main Street without having restricted access and without causing issues for our customers, and ultimately having a lot of negative people down at the bottom of the hill. I do think raising the adjacent property and adding a lane, and we had talked about, even if that was to happen, obviously myself putting money towards that development, and I'm not opposed to that. For me, I'm going to be here as long as I can. So this isn't I'm just getting started. I plan on being in Oregon City for 20, 30 years longer. The building up on the hill, I believe it will help because it has quite a bit of traffic on it that is headed down the hill. And just, basic numbers and analysis. We brought all of our headquarters guys up to check it out, and they felt like it was good because they realize kind of the negative side of having people every day. And here's the thing. I've had so many discussions about this intersection with people that aren't even customers, that are just like, what are you guys selling down there? But the reality is, it's like, the reality is that one of the main factors of the heat down there is that people will purposely it's almost like they'll see a car ready to take a left turn. They could easily go around. It's not marked, and you're right. Some people, they don't care. They just fly right around it. Other people will see a marked lane, and they will just purposely get it right behind the car with the turn signal on, hold their horn down, roll their window down, and start screaming at all of our people, which are high school and college-age kids, flipping them off, waiting until that car turns, and then still middle finger out the window driving up the hill. And so for us conducting business, our managers were like, can you do something? So that was why we moved on the building up the hill. There's a few things that I would love to do. I don't know what the plans are for the lot across the street, but I know that there's signs posted. I've several times tried to make contact and get some sort of a deal where we could pay to have all of our employees park in that lot so that we would free up, it's 9 spaces we'd free up on our lot. So if you think in the peak business hours, 9 cars that we could pull in, and we fully staff on all shifts runners that are on our lot, and they not only are they texting in orders to get the car to move quickly, but they even wave people in onto our lot, and they'll tell people, hey, park over here. So we're like flagging from within our own business. We're doing everything that we possibly can, and so that was, for me, it was like there's a few pieces I think that could bring a lot of peace to that intersection. One is if we would be able to lease those parking spaces across the street and get our employees over there. 2, I'm in favor of adding a turn lane, and I realize your point is right on. You can only get 2 cars in, but if you do all the three things in line of leasing spaces, getting all the available parking on that lot open for customers, so they can get onto the lot. So then, if there's 3 cars in line, they'll pull in and park. But also with us opening another location, it's a half mile up the hill. All 3 of those, I think you'll see that issue down there go away. I think that there's issues, but it won't be us. The issues that are down there are real. Even on PM, we're not busy in the PM. 34 cars is really nothing for us. We pull those it's not, you're probably only going to see 1 or 2 cars. You won't even think we're busy because of how quickly we go through them. But during those hours, if you look out the window, you'll see cars up the hill stacked and cars trying to make it through, and that's just the nature of the intersection. So I guess really from my standpoint, I just wanted the opportunity to say I'm really easy to work with. I want to do anything I possibly can to make it a safe section of our city. 10th and Main that's where I got my start as a franchisee. I've been with our company for 20 years, and honestly, I take everything to heart. So I don't sit out there and just look at the people that are yelling. I value that my business is causing people to get super upset and freaked out. I will say, though, we have yet to have any accidents on the train tracks while I've been there. There was a drunk driver. That was the only wreck we had, and he was trying to take his own life, and it was in an SUV, and he was coming down Singer Hill, ducked the gate, and hit the tree, and a train hit him, and it was a mess. But it was it wasn't something caused by our traffic. So whenever I hear the dangers of our business, and I even seeing a trailer on it, in all our time there, we have not caused a single accident on the tracks. And so, I guess in a sense, I just want an opportunity to work and not restrict our access at that location, and try to do anything that we can to open up. And actually, I will tell you this, I already moved and striped double entrance off of 10th Street. We had a discussion. You had this site plan. I loved it. And I tore up the lot, repaved, and striped it. And so it's already in motion. Yeah.
So the 20-some people that work down there, at least, 17 of them are my students.
Yeah, they know you.
And I go there every morning. Thankfully, that location is my summer location. During the school year, I'm up at the top every day. So I get so frustrated going down there because I have to time it just right to know when it's going to be chaos and not. But one of the things I refuse to park in the street. So I think part of it is just the customers themselves not realizing that I shouldn't be blocking a public street. I should be parking and walking over there, or I should be pulling into the lot. So if it's backed up, I drive around the corner and I either park or I drive into your lot, and usually there's parking spots there. But what's confused me lately is the arrows, because there's no arrows coming out. There's only arrows going in. So if I go in this side and go around and park and then come out, everyone's mad at me going out because they see the arrow going in and think I'm doing the wrong thing. So it's crazy. These scenarios, or these different options, I think the one that, looking at it, I always thought, a median would be great, but I think it would actually be worse for people coming down the hill, because if, let's say, you have the 2 queues going in, that gives more capacity than you have now, which is great, but it will back up because most people don't want to block the street, so they don't go by, or they go around the corner or whatever. But there's capacity, so they know they can pull in, and anyone coming down Singer Hill that wants to turn in right is going to stop there.
Mm-hmm.
And no one can go around them because the median's there. So that's I don't know that that's real helpful. And then this other scenario here is complicated. It's one that we've all griped about. I'm frustrated every time I go down there, and I have seen accidents, not on the tracks, but I've been down there several times when I've seen accidents, and so I'm frustrated because I want to be able to go down there, but also aware of the problems too. So I think seeing these options, unfortunately, doesn't help a lot, which we know, which is why we've been trying to work on it. But so I'm not sure where we go from here.
I have a question. It looks like both of these scenarios have you having the entrance off of 10th and an exit only off of Main Street. Is that hurtful to your business, or is that? Oh,
So we have not operated with an exit only off of Main Street. There's an entrance and an exit, but like Rocky's saying, the reality is that you'll see that entrance arrow and you go in, and there's no exit arrow unless it's through the drive-through. So it's like funneling. So if he pulls in, gets out of his car, walks over, gets a drink, gets back in his car, and he's like, "Time to leave." It's like, no, you aren't.
Right. So
you have to go through the
turn
drive-through
around in the lot and try to get back out.
And so there was, I'm not trying to load all these. Basically, there is a way to fix it. And the way, though, requires a landscape exemption, or at least giving us a little bit of wiggle room. We're at the requirement when we put in our site plan for taking over and redoing that lot. There was pretty strict guidelines for the amount of landscape required. So there is a portion of our lot that is just rocks and bushes, that if we were able to actually remove that, we could widen our driveway and actually have a usable exit that's for people that are pulling in and pulling out. I've looked at several different ways to cycle the parking lot. I mean, you could, if the cars are out of there, if our employees aren't parallel parked on the curb on the far, the east side, then you could, in a sense, have that would be part of your drive queue, or you could U-turn and come out. But man, the lot's so small, and with the increase in volume, and then the increase of staff, there's a decrease in parking. So everywhere you go, it's that's where it was like, well, where can we find? I don't feel good about asking high school and college age kids to go park down where they can get parking at, it's like quarter mile down the road.
Well, have you talked to the folks kitty
If they're
corner?
in high school, why are they going to that location? They're up at
Have you talked to the folks kitty corner at the healthcare place about leasing spots in their lot?
No, I have not.
Well, we've got 9 empty spots right across the street.
Yeah, but that's not intended for a parking lot. Currently, it's not zoned for a parking lot.
No, it is. It's a striped parking lot.
I know, but it's not supposed to be.
Right.
I'm correct. Please, Tony.
Yeah, we used to have permits out of that parking lot. We went back. We had a complaint about the legality of the parking lot. We did the research. It was never actually permitted. We just started parking there at some point in history, so we did take those permits away.
So it's not a parking thing.
I recognize we're in a work session, so we're probably not going to solve this. I wasn't sure. I guess I would like some more time to work with Abe. I like this trifecta idea, if you will, that has various solutions incorporated in that. I'm not sure what the timeline is on the building up at 7th and Taylor, but that was, or Division, I guess, Division and Malala.
Close enough for government.
That was new information for me. I think one of the concerns that I have is just the frustration that I've heard, more off the record kind of conversations about just sticking a median. Well, what I'd like to do is if we're going to do a median, I'd like to bring back a resolution and get that kind of passed that way, because I have a feeling we'll have the same conversation, and I know some of these Dutch Brothers fans, they're likely to be here picketing, and I don't want you to have that either. It's
Don't
better to
encourage
have
that, John.
I'm not encouraging. I'm just suggesting. What I've heard from Bill Kobysman is we have the right to limit access off of 10th Street. That's within the city's right. Whether that's what we really collectively agree is the right thing to do or not is still, in my mind, a question. So how do I get there? And I don't have the answer tonight.
Okay. So I have a couple things to say. One, I'm intrigued about the Big Dog site because I can see how that may relieve some of the issues down at 12th and Main for a time. But I don't understand it myself because I don't drink coffee. But apparently, the more coffee places you put in, the more people drink coffee. So I could foresee where that place would end up being as busy as the one downtown, and we haven't really accomplished anything in a couple of years. So I don't want I don't want anybody to think that that's a magic bullet by you guys opening there, because obviously you have a successful business model and are good at what you do. So I doubt that you're going to allow that place to be unprofitable just to relieve the space down at the bottom of the hill. So, I think you'll end up with more customers in both places at the end of the day, 2 or 3 years, and we're back to the same situation we're in. At the same time, I am probably the most business-friendly guy that you're going to want to have as mayor. So I would encourage us, as I have said many times, we work towards yes. We're not looking for a no. Mm-hmm. So if there's a way for us to, bend, twist, negotiate, compromise to make that successful, that's what we want to do. At the same time, providing, I still think there's got to be a place for a bailout down there, because I don't want to be the mayor, somebody stuck on the tracks, whether it was because they were trying to get a cup of coffee or because they, for whatever reason, I don't want that to happen on my watch. So we need to find a way to find a way for somebody in the last ditch to be able to get the hell out of there.
Okay.
The last thing is that we have to make sure that every business that we deal with, is important to the city. So, I'm not looking towards just saying unilaterally we're going to do this. But at the same time, we have to appreciate the fact that there's all the businesses that down Main Street and around Railroad that in those hour and a half or 2 hours in the late afternoon, traffic is stacking up all over the place and causing other issues down throughout the city. So it has to be a balancing act. Mr. Shaw.
So, I actually penciled out, I was talking to John Lewis about this a while back, and on a little napkin, I kind of penciled it out to where the diagram before this, John, the other, yeah. So you've got a double lane entry. What would happen if you didn't carry that all the way around through the building so that you actually had another attendant out there actually giving the coffee, taking the money and stuff, so you had 2 lanes going through there at all times?
It's doable. There's a couple issues that end up happening with it because we've thought about it too. I've brought in all of our crazy thinkers from our company from all over. I mean,
had a few cups and okay,
yeah,
let's go.
Exactly. drink some double shots and get out there. So it's like there is an issue of safety for our employees. So when you start jumping across traffic and handing out drinks, then I start to worry about somebody getting a foot ran over. And oh man, it's been like 15 years ago, but I was doing an opening in Southern Oregon, and I had this sweet girl that was out in the line, and she was giving stickers to people and talking to them, and a car started to pull forward while she was standing there talking to them, and she got her foot ran over, and it broke her foot. And so when you see that, then you go, it's just not worth it. And it's the same reason why, you look at an intersection and go, I don't want to have a car stuck on the tracks. I don't want that on my watch. I wouldn't either. And there, when you look at that, it's like from our standpoint, and you're correct. I mean, my goal is not to open up another location and have it fail. That would be not wise. Yeah. But it does buy time. And in the reality of what is the future? What does the future look like? Do I open another location in West Lynn? Do I have one across the bridge that pulls traffic? Potentially. I mean, we're a growing company. I'm looking at sites all over. Will we have 5 locations in Oregon City at one point? Maybe we will. I will say that we'll have the happiest city on earth. I mean,
not a lot of
like
sleep,
Disney,
but
we'll get a lot done, though, man.
Yeah. But that's only because you have got a great creed, which the optimist creed that you use, which Rocky and I, as optimists, share with your company. So,
okay. So is this horse dead at this point?
No.
Okay.
No.
Oh, Commissioner Pauly.
I've been waiting patiently. This intersection is a problem anyway. It's a busy intersection, so there's a lot of things going on. And I think if we do other things, it may even confuse it even more, just because the distance between the railroad tracks and the Main Street is so short. So you said something that intrigued me, and that is to get to have landscape exemption. If the more that you can manage people on your piece of property already, the better. What about double drive-through? I mean, are there other ways? Have we thought outside the box at all of what some sort of concession
Like a pneumatic
that would
thing?
allow him? Well, no. If you didn't have to worry about the landscape, would that free you up a little bit?
Well,
to-
yeah. If you can look at it right on that map, if we weren't dealing with landscape, we would be able to have a double lane. We would be able to recirculate that lot from a blank canvas. I mean, even potentially, there's so many different designs that I could come up with that would give us better stacking off that lot.
The problem
get
is,
people off the street.
Let me make sure we aren't going too far down this path. But if you were to try to move the building, that would be
Oh.
a new use.
It would.
Yes.
It would get complicated on the non-conforming use.
Yes.
standard.
Okay. So
yeah, I'm not
just be
suggesting
clear, we can't move the building.
I'm
Sure.
not suggesting that at all.
And I wasn't
I'm
either.
saying get rid of
Okay.
the landscape so that you can use more of the lot to manage it on your lot instead of having them reconfiguring the street to do it.
Do we have the ability in the code to sort of like cut and fill? Could he mitigate some other place in the city to take care of his landscape issue?
Dutch part.
Not that.
Dutch part.
It's
It's
a
worth
clear
a try.
It's
I
a
like
clear
it.
10% minimum. I think off the top of my head, I think it says 10%. It's a pretty clear number based on the lot size. But in that creativity, maybe there is another
Roof
way
garden?
to accommodate that.
And is there
Hanging gardens.
green roof? There you go. So, do we have the ability, as a city commission, to provide an exemption based on safety and based on a specific site situation?
And has that been done before?
So the code has adjustments and variances. Typically, an adjustment gets you to a certain percentage that likely isn't going to resolve this problem, and those are relatively easier to get. Variances, the way the code is written, typically require showing that you couldn't otherwise make use of the site, which isn't the case here. So it would be difficult. There might be some type of code fix or something. I don't know how much. I don't want to speak for Tony about how much he's looked at that.
I mean, we are a home rule charter, right? So the feds pass laws all the time for one specific situation.
They do, but they don't. It's the classic left-handed Bulgarian rule. That they say it's for everybody, but it's clearly aimed at one particular situation. And I
All right.
I guess we'd have to. I think the first thing to do is maybe have the opportunity to sit down with Abe and look
Yeah.
at some of these options so that
Okay.
we know what we're talking
All
about.
right. Well, obviously, communications is key. Commissioner Megelberg, do you have anything else?
If I had to choose, I would not go for the center median. I think it's unfair to restrict access that way.
Okay. Well, this is going to come back to us again.
Yeah.
I'm certain. So, Mr. Gebeisman?
have one final piece. So, and this is related to the CIS video we saw earlier, and I guess I want to emphasize that, as I understand it, the commission recognizes that there is a safety issue here, but are choosing not to address it at this point to allow a solution to come forward that best protects the citizens of the city. So,
Well, I think we are addressing it. We're addressing it by initiating the conversation and finding a happy medium so that we aren't killing one of our homegrown businesses at the same time trying to save lives.
Absolutely.
And we don't make decisions at work sessions anyway. So.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks, Abe.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
your time.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Okay, we're going to move on. That was way more time than I expected to spend on that.
We talked
Where are we at?
Well, I'm trying to think about this for a second. I'm going to move 3G up to now, because I don't think it's going to take very long. The 15496 at Buena Vista House,
You may be
structural issues.
surprised.
I may be, but I don't think so. Mr. Archer? Is Mr. Archer here? Sorry, Scott.
No problem.
I just don't think we're going to get through everything tonight.
I'm at the back table today, so I get to sit at this table.
At the kids'
All right.
table?
Yes.
Okay.
Good evening, Commissioners. So just very quickly, for the Commission members that may not be that familiar with Buena Vista House, the Buena Vista House is a small structure, city-owned structure within Atkinson Park. It was built in the mid-1920s, is about what we've been able to peg. And it was for use by the Buena Vista Club, which was a former civic club in our community. After several decades of use in about the mid to latter 1980s, the club, I think, was disbanding or kind of sort of ceasing to operate any further, and they offered the city that building. And through the records I've been able to find and reading a number of old city reports, commission reports, and so forth, it appeared that the city accepted that, but it did so kind of with a little bit of concern, because there are actually some notes of considering that the other option was probably to demolish the house at that time. So this is about 30 years ago or so. And that's important because that kind of plays back into the discussion. So since that time, it's been since about 1987, I think, is when actually the city accepted that donation of the Buena Vista House. It's been operated by the city for community uses, kind of like a meeting room or what have you. It's been rented out primarily to either one-time uses like birthday parties or some kind of meetings, or sort of ongoing things. We've had a number of different entities that have met in there over time. In recent history, it has been what I would call pretty minimally used. We actually tracked our rentals over the last 5 years prior to its closure last year. Our average yearly revenue was less than $2,500 a year, so less than $2,500 a year in rental income. If you factored out how much it costs us just to probably have it insured, you heard the insurance discussion earlier, everything that we own has to be itemized and insured, and that's on that list. Maintenance, cleaning as we offer it to uses, I would
utilities
estimate, and keeping the lights and the heat and so forth on, I would estimate that we're probably we're operating negatively as far as revenue and expense goes on that. Over time, your commission are well familiar with our deferred maintenance issues in the Parks Department, and unfortunately this is yet another example of that, although I think the city inherited a building that was kind of in a not great condition anyway, and probably didn't, I'm guesstimating because I've only been with the city about 11 years, so I don't cover all of that time period since the city's owned this, but that it didn't see a need to greatly invest in this building because it was kind of it was used some, but not a lot. So there hasn't been a lot put into it, and you add that to our deferred maintenance problems, and you can see that there's probably been a pretty significant amount of not really doing too much in the building. And that's sort of where we're at today, is that over the last few years we've been watching it pretty closely, knowing that we've got some structural types of issues, and last year we set out to just kind of fully analyze that because it had reached that point of sort of critical concern. We worked with a structural engineer who came and did basically kind of a cursory walkthrough and analysis, and also our building official, Mr. Roberts, came through, and between those two entities, the engineer and our own building official, it was determined that the building was not safe to be kept open until something further was done. So in essence, it was rad tagged, meaning that it was closed for any public use. until something could be done to improve that situation or whatever the situation may be. So as I said, that was last year. It's been, I think we're actually probably at about a year and a half now. It's been vacant essentially, and it's been kind of locked up, boarded up, and we've been sort of sitting on it trying to figure out. It's one of those many things in that deferred maintenance category. What do we do with it? So I think we've kind of sat and waited, and we're at that point where we need to decide something. We did a couple of things, just a quick kind of sort of what are the options here for about probably between $7,000 to $10,000. We could hire a structural engineer to do kind of an additional report on top of the cursory report that we already received. We received that first report as a donated service, but we would get into some further things, and that would probably tell us in more depth what exactly we're looking at, though we've got, and it's listed in that staff report. I won't read it all off for time's sake, but in your staff report, we listed the major structural concerns that we've got. We would identify costs of probably fixing those and so on and so forth. With our professional knowledge of the folks that we have on staff and talking to engineers, we know that those items, although we haven't specifically identified the cost, we know those are going to be in the several tens of thousands of dollars, if not probably well into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. I hesitate to give you an exact number because we haven't done that work, but we know it is going to be significant, quite substantial probably.
At least six figures.
I would estimate, yes. Yeah, and I'm not sure exactly how far into that, but yeah, I would estimate at least, yeah, at least over $100,000. The other analysis or the other estimate that we did some just these are just kind of quick estimates that we got. We would go back if any action were to be taken, and we would follow up and do this more as a formal process. But we gathered some quick estimates from some contractors that we've worked with and some companies that we know of that do the type of work that we're talking about, to ask what would be the cost to demolish the building, to take it down. There are different ways to do that. There are more green ways of doing that where you preserve the materials, and then there are kind of just the quick, bring in a bulldozer and knock it over and take it to the landfill types of things. We got numbers between $8,000 and $18,000 on that. So I would think it would be safe to say that we're probably at not more than $20,000 to take the house down. Likely we could work through some processes where we might be able to get that substantially lower.
Is the facility secure at this time?
It is. I wouldn't say it's greatly secure, but it's locked up, boarded as much as we can make it. But it's an old wooden structure.
And given the population that we have of homeless folks, especially in that neighborhood, we could safely assume that could be habited at some point or another during the winter if it's not fully secured.
We do our best to check on that and make sure that's not happening, but that's not out of the realm of possibility.
Okay, thank
so
you.
we do try to keep an eye on that, but yeah, anything's possible. So based on the safety concerns, such as just somebody getting in there, it's probably in the category at this point of potentially an attractive nuisance for the city. Although again, we do our best to make the effort to try to maintain it to at least to a level of securing the building, but there's no guarantee of that. Plus the cost of what it would cost us to repair it versus the actual revenue, or even that, what I would say, the community value that we get out of that, because the use was so low. And I would contend that if there are needs for meeting spaces and things like that, we've got those in the city. We have meeting rooms that you can rent at the Pioneer Center. We have a community room at the swimming pool. And we've got some future
community room program at the library.
Future buildings that we're working on at the library, and future public safety buildings that'll have additional community space. So my professional opinion is we don't necessarily need that space for any specific use. In previous decades, that was probably the case, but I think it served its useful purpose as far as that goes. So the staff recommendation would be that we would demolish the building. I know there's some, I've heard from some in the community that feel, that has some sentimental or personal value, but I'm just giving you my sort of basic, professional opinion, sort of the dollars and cents and the brass tacks. The other thing is, if we did take the building down, it would open up that front of the park, and we would potentially be able to do some things, improve the access. We're in need of some additional parking spaces in the front and in the park in general, and basically we have nowhere for those, and that building kind of takes up most of the usable frontage of the park. So we could do some positive things and open it up, and we're currently working with the high school construction group to improve the picnic shelter up the hill from that building, and so it would be nice to do some of those types of things. So there's a very quick sort of summary of what's going on. There's a lot more to it. I'd be happy to answer those questions, but I just wanted to give you the basic, let you ask me the questions and fill in the blanks for you. But while we don't make any you don't make any specific policy decisions, I think at this type of meeting we could certainly get a sense from the commission of where you're at, what you're thinking, and then staff could begin to put into place some action based on that.
Commissioner Smith.
All right. I will do this quick, but I do as quick as I can. But the good thing is we don't have to make a decision tonight. So, Scott, one question. You said 1920s. Is that how did you discover that?
We've got, we did a while back, and we've been collecting documentation. So we actually did record searches and deeds and city commission minutes way back to then. So we got information that when the city was deeded that building, there were some documents that came forward with it. So we've had a file. So there is actually, okay. I've got documents that tell us pretty much when that, and that's all based on what's in the file that we have. So the number I was seeing, or the date I was seeing was something like 1927 is when it looks like it was built.
Okay, so
as best I can tell.
So I'll say this, as one person who cares about Oregon City's history and the.
Like we rest
no,
of us
I'm not
don't?
saying you don't, but but if you could tell me what the history of this building was before you demolished it, then I would say that's fine. But I don't think you can. So I don't want to make decisions about, which we can't do tonight, I don't want to make decisions about demolishing buildings unless we know what that building is or the history of it. So I've done some research, and I'm going to share quick information about what I just found out in the last 48 hours and just researching. That it's probably, the park's 1920s. I don't know that the house is, so I don't want to see whatever staff has, but several references to. I went to the Museum of the Oregon Territory and had some help today, this afternoon after I left school. So what I can find is that the house was moved in 1930 to the park. Now, there's several references to that. The park was the actual Buena Vista Club basically created the park, which I found was interesting. George Atkinson, all these people that are tied to the history of the city. The Buena Vista Club was a club that created a club based on the neighbors in the Buena Vista neighborhood, which of course no one knows that's Buena Vista neighborhood except for the fact that there's a big sign on that building. So when the building goes away, we've erased all history of what Buena Vista was. Buena Vista neighborhood created the club to improve the city, to create parks, to do various other things. The house, from what I could tell, was donated by a man named Charles Surface. Now, it shows that he donated the house, that he donated it before it was moved, from what I can find, and it was moved in 1930. So we know that it predates 1930. So I went to actually a phone directory to look up Charles Surface. The house was moved from this block Okay? The house was moved from this block sometime between 1917 and 1930. But Charles lived in that house on this block in 1917, which means the house, from what I can tell, predates that. So I'm not saying that this is enough information to save the house or the building, but I want to look into it more. I think that I'll bring the Liberty Theater up as an example. When the Liberty Theater came down, the county saw a price tag of 6 digits and said, no one's ever going to come into Oregon City and spend $1 million to redo any of these old buildings in the 90s. And so they tore it down. If that building hadn't been torn down then, 10 years later, exactly what was happening is everyone's redoing the stores, all those places downtown, and look, we have them. Okay? Problem is making a decision to demolish something that you don't know the history of, it's gone. If it can sit there, and I'm thinking about other things, we have the Parks Foundation that's being talked about. We have all these other things. So right now saying that there's not a use or importance for this building now, we don't know that. But as soon as it's gone, it's gone. And as soon as it's gone, the history's gone. So I want to do some more research on this. I'll bring it back. But I think we have to weigh that with everything else. And I'm not saying that it's historically valuable. I don't know. But it's definitely an important site, and it definitely is the identity for that historic part of Oregon City. And I just want to say, I think sometimes, Oregon City is credited with saving a lot, but we've demolished a lot. And it's frustrating, I think, to, not know the history of the place that we're destroying. So I'm going to keep working on that, and I'll work with Scott or see what he's uncovered, because I'm sure there's more information out there. But I would ask the commission not to make a decision on this in the immediate future until I can look into it a little more.
Commissioner Mangelberg?
A couple ideas. Clackamas County Parks sometimes has a house on their county parks, and that's where a caretaker lives that looks out after the park as a presence and that kind of thing. And so there's the space is inhabited. They're paying rent to cover the heat and the lights, and it provides kind of a safety feature, which might be a nice thing in Atkinson Park, which had at one point had a reputation of being a fight location, which is not so great. I don't know if that's been cleaned up. I sure hope so.
It has.
Anyway, so that's an idea. Another thing is if the decision is made to take it down, one entity that's often happy to do that kind of thing is the fire department, because they love to practice on these things. So that'd be less expensive. That's less expensive probably than $8,000 to $12,000.
The big problem there is there's a fairly large tree canopy right there.
Yeah, we
thought
have
about that.
approached them just so we could have all the information and knowledge that we could have about what the options were, and that was a concern. But doesn't mean we can't reapproach and make sure that that's.
So, just to be clear, I don't disagree with Commissioner Smith that we shouldn't rush to judgment. However, having looked at it extensively from the outside and having heard what some of the folks have said, the ability even to preserve it, to keep it from just falling down in the next couple of years is pretty difficult.
That was the same for the Ermitinger house, too, by the way.
Yeah, that's true. It's true. I think we should know what we're dealing with.
I understand. So I'm willing to do some more research and let's see what else comes out about it. But the Ermitinger is a completely different animal.
I agree.
And to be honest, we've spent. You could have built 3 Ermitinger houses, 2 spec with square nails for what we've done rebuilding that one. So,
but it wouldn't be the oldest house in the city.
I agree with you. I'm not saying that, but we can't afford to do everything, and So anyway, anything else from anybody else?
Yes, I would like to explore selling the structure, see if somebody wants to buy it and move it off of there. So,
sure.
Okay.
We may be faced with our charter issue with selling park property with that. I'm not certain whether that would fall in that category, but
Scott, I'm trying to
I
help
understand.
you out. Okay. You got to bring up this charter thing every time.
Killing me. All right.
Blame the
If
attorney
If
for
you're
that.
moving a house with a kitchen in it, would that be considered a food truck? Just throwing that out
All
there.
right, we're done with this. Moving on. So, Mr. Underwood, this tourism grant process, OCCIT process, is that something that we absolutely need to do tonight? Can that get put off?
Yeah, we can put that off.
Okay.
It wouldn't be
There's at least-
until November because we have ethics training.
But the OCCIT and that stuff doesn't happen again until
January.
beginning of the year, right?
Yeah, right.
Okay.
right.
Mr. Smith?
Well, there's at least 5 people in the audience for this topic.
Oh, is there? Okay.
So I don't think we need to go into the full discussion, but I wonder, could we get at least a quick report about what Oregon City Tourism Council is doing now, and then just so the commission knows what that group is doing parallel to this.
Okay.
But I think this topic is something that can come probably later, but I want them to know.
This is
what
related
else
kind
is
of
going on.
indirectly. So this is a special effort or parallel effort that's going on with the Oregon City Tourism Council. They are conducting a study to see where tourism in the future might be housed, how it might be managed, what our expectations might be as far as tourism, given some of the developments around the city. It's basically dovetailing on an older study that was done a number of years back, but it's allowing that study to be even more comprehensive. So we have more of a plan on how to manage tourism once it does come into the city. So what you have before you here tonight, and this was given to me by Jonathan Stone of the Main Street Organization. I'm going to submit it for the record, but it's just a press release saying that they've selected a consultant to help them with that study. The city has agreed to match their funds for that study, and so that's the only involvement that the city has in it right now.
Okay. Anything else, Mr. Smith?
So the only reason I wanted the commission to know that is because that process may shed some light on the OCCIT grants and the proposal from
Right.
Eric on the Tourism Council. So I don't see a problem in waiting on this. The only concern I guess I would have is the timeline that's kind of pushing OCCIT as a topic is if we want to issue grants. Now, a lot of people in that tourism, in this tourism discussion, have shared that maybe that's okay to hold the grants for this next cycle until we figure out this problem. But I also don't want to speak for all of the entities that come and ask for OCCIT grants, because I'm sure there are some that may be surprised if we hold that grant money. I just think it's hard to fix the problems with OCCIT until we go through this tourism process and see how that relates to this and then fix the whole thing. So I would like to see us personally wait. I don't know, if there's feelings other than that, but that would be my thought.
I think it was the general consensus of the commission that given the evolving nature of tourism in Oregon City based on things that are probably going to happen in the next couple of years and then moving forward with the Lamp Falls Legacy project, that rather than dole this stuff out in $10,000 and $15,000 increments, it made more sense to save that up for larger projects that will have a greater impact on tourism in the city. So I agree with you. Let's get the study done and then talk about this again as we go forward.
Okay, so is that something that we need as a commission to probably make a decision about at an actual meeting where we decide about holding the funds or not holding the funds?
I don't believe so, because it was not something that was voted on before. So it's just
Okay, I'm just.
And I think everybody in the group of funders or fundees has heard that we were talking about this situation, so I don't think it would be a surprise to anybody. Mr. Parno?
Thank you, Mayor Holliday and City Commissioner. So to talk to the timeline on when the tourism grants have been allocated in the past, we've still got a few months, so I think it's either January, February that we put out notices. Recall that we have some businesses that have some specific programs that are a benefit to the community that sort of look forward to these grants, and I would just recommend that if we do, that we fast track the analysis and try to get things in place, and most certainly the commission can, at this point in time, in about 3 or 4 months, say, hey, let's move forward and make some grants, either fully or on a limited basis, and then let's continue to study. My recommendation would be that we move forward as quickly as we can, and hopefully we can get it done before then. But if not, I'd recommend just sort of that we go through the process again and just straighten it out as quickly as possible.
Okay. And I get that. I do want to say that it's, at least in my opinion, that both of these groups, both OCCIT and Mentor Enhancement, have been too long with too many groups. That this should be seed money, startup capital, that sort of thing, that it should not be 10, 15, 20 years every year coming back giving the same organization money again. That's not what the purpose of these is, at least in my opinion.
Right.
Okay, are we done with that? Questions, anybody?
Thank you.
Okay. So the last two. I'm going to take the shortest one first, I hope. 15-465, to support opportunities to enhance tourism modification and transient room tasks. Mr. Parno. Oh, no.
You say that, but let me surprise you. Thank you, Mayor Holliday, City Commissioners. I think we can have a very brief presentation here. Because recall that we had a discussion about this pretty significantly at the Commission goal-setting retreat, the biennial retreat in January. So at that time, the Commission asked for us to do some preliminary work to assess whether our transient tax lodging rate was consistent with regionally. We found out that it wasn't, and so the Commission directed staff to do a little more research. And what I'd like to do, I'll introduce Ryan in just a second. What I'd like to do is have this work session and get some brief direction from the Commission on how to move forward with the ordinance, which I think had already been directed, but we just want to make sure you're comfortable with where we're headed. At that, I'd like to introduce Ryan Bradyhoff, who is the city's financial analyst and an excellent employee of the city. We're very fortunate to have him. He's done some amazing things, like helped us to contract out the billing services for utility customer service, which saves the city like $20,000 a year, and he's also helped us to get a lot of our rates up to consistently applying the
indexing for inflation.
Indexing for inflation. So he's going through a lot of that process. So I'm very thankful to have Ryan here, and he's put together a brief presentation for you, and I'll let Ryan take it away.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. It's 6 slides, and this is one of them, so it should go pretty quick. The purpose of this presentation is to propose a modification to the transient room tax, the primary change being a modification to the rate. So I'd like to start by quickly citing the city's authority for collecting a transient room tax. And so as you can see here, it comes from both Oregon statute and Oregon City Municipal Code. So what we're proposing is, as you can see here, our current rate is 4%, so that's 4% of gross rental revenue. We're proposing to change that to 6%. So we looked at the entire state and looked at all the rates that different cities charge, and then we looked specifically here in the Portland metro area. And what we found is that we are on the low end, and it seems to be that 6% and a little higher is more in line with our neighboring jurisdictions.
Hang on one second. So you said Portland is 6 to 8%. How does that work?
So Portland had established a 6% rate and recently implemented a 2% additional surcharge specific to
the convention center hotel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Good question.
So as you know, goal 1 of the Commission's goals is to maintain an environment for successful economic development. And one of the priorities under that is to support opportunities to enhance tourism with modifications to the lodging tax. And so we feel like this would accomplish that by raising it to 6%. So as for the entities that will be impacted, as you know, we only have one hotel here. That's the Best Western River Shore Hotel. And so we have reached out to them to notify them of what we're proposing. But of course, the Clackamas RV Park will be affected as well, because they currently collect and remit to the city the transient room tax. And then also online travel companies like Priceline, Travelocity, Orbitz. They also, basically a situation where if a customer books a room at Best Western but uses one of these online travel companies, it's actually the online travel company that submits to us. So they'll have to be notified of the increase in the rate.
So we currently have no bed and breakfast in Oregon City?
No, I don't think so.
We do not.
This is it.
Cute, Jim.
There other than Jim's living room, we do have a couple of houses that are
I don't
on the
think that's
river that
luxury.
we're looking into.
Okay,
So,
all right, all right.
Did the Buena Vista come up again? Oh.
Question, does Airbnb and some of those other more online services fall under this category, or is there a consideration of that?
I believe that's what the state was trying to. Basically, these travel lodging intermediaries came as a result of a House bill for Oregon legislature 2 years ago, where they wanted to draw this distinction between transient lodging providers, like a hotel, and then any intermediary that's like a reseller of the room or selling directly to the customer. So yes, I believe the goal of that was to enable collecting the lodging tax on those businesses. Okay. So really the next step would be to draft an ordinance which would include these revisions. So particularly, like I said, modifying the rate from 4% to 6%, but then also under the section dealing with the disposition of the tax, specifying in the code how those funds would be utilized. So like I show here, 5.4% would be specifically to fund tourism and tourism-related activities, and the remaining 0.6% for program administration. And that is something that the Oregon statute allows for local jurisdictions to do.
And what percent do we spend now on program administration?
We don't spend any currently, so that would be 10% of the total revenue that go to administration. So we've been behind the curve. A lot of folks charge for that. State statutes recognizes that, but we hadn't implemented that in the past. So we have some costs to recoup.
So the first reading would be at the next regular meeting of the commission on September 16th, and then the second reading, the ordinance, would be on October 7th. Also included in that, we would like to include some changes to the language to make it more consistent with those changes that the state made that I was mentioning earlier, just so we're more consistent.
So just as a point of information, the Oregon City transit tax is on top of the county's 6%
Right.
transit tax, so the sum total of the visitors paying is 12%.
That's correct.
But it's still competitive within the region.
Absolutely. Those rates we saw earlier were just the city rates, and of course all those cities are also required to pay the county as well, meaning if you book in that city, if you're in Multnomah County or Clackamas County or Washington County. And of course there's the 1% state that would go to the state as well.
I had thought that there was a statewide effort, and maybe it never went through the legislature to it was initiated by the Oregon Lodging Association to restrict local jurisdictions' ability to increase transit taxes. So I don't know if you've checked into that or not, but it was something that was discussed probably 4 or 5 years ago.
Thank you, Commissioner Mangelberg. So these things come up here and there, so now is an opportune time to make sure that we shore up to the current rates. So we reviewed the current statutes, and there were some changes to the rules in terms of how you can allocate funds and increase them and things like that, but this would all be in accordance with those. The other thing is we looked at the counties, so Multnomah, Clackamas, and Washington County. Each of those counties charges their own rate, and so the cities are on top of that. Just for some information from the commission, Ryan and I were talking about some of the more coastal towns and Central Oregon tourism towns do charge more, so they're between 8 and 10%, things like that, so that would be within the commission's purview. But our recommendation of 6% is based on this region, so like Oswego, Wilsonville, Westland, Milwaukee doesn't have a hotel, surprisingly, but so I think we're consistent with those. And certainly there could be some changes to the state laws down the road.
Okay, so let me say this, that this is one of those times when I talk about boiling the frog, and that is that if we don't consistently raise rates on a semi-regular basis, then we get behind the times. And this is the perfect time to get ahead of the times, because I believe that in the next year, 2, 3, 4, we're probably going to get at least 1, if not 2 new hotels in Oregon City. So we would be better off doing this now than later.
Transit taxes are really easy to impose because they're imposed on people that aren't here. There are visitors, and most people don't look at lodging tax when they're trying to make a decision about where they want to stay. So, there is some pain, but it's as things go, they're relatively painless.
Well, and if you're going to Disneyland, you typically want to stay at Disneyland or somewhere very close by. And we are developing our own little Disneyland, so I think going, well, you know what I mean. A world-class attraction, shall we say? Not necessarily, but the same idea. So I think that's the point. Is people aren't going to want to stay downtown Portland and come out to the Legacy Project. They're going to want to be here.
Correct, and we'll still be competitive.
Right.
So.
Okay. Anybody else on this subject?
Okay, so you'll see us at the next commission business meeting with an ordinance.
Looking
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so right-of-way and A-frame permit fees. I could have swore this subject was beaten to death over a year and a half, so maybe somebody can explain to me why it's here now.
Because the prices went up to $370.
Thank you, Mayor. Evening, Commissioners. I also have Laura Turway. She's going to assist with the presentation tonight. She worked on the sign code as we went through this.
This looks strikingly familiar.
When we adopted the ordinance implementing the changes to the sign code, we also proposed some additional fees. As you may recall, signs in the right-of-way were illegal. We didn't allow A-frames. That became a new permitted use under the code, and there's an administrative cost to processing, tracking, code enforcement of that. And what we had proposed is that under this new code, in the right-of-way, you now have the opportunity for A-frames in front of businesses on the sidewalk. You have banners at 2 locations throughout the city that'll be placed across the street, and then you also have banners that would go on light posts that have been designed for that. So I had made a presentation to the downtown group, and we received some feedback with some concerns about what it would cost for a business to have 1 A-frame, and if that was really equitable. And so at our last meeting, there was a discussion if we should bring this back, and the recommendation was to do that. So we put together a brief presentation on the costs, but essentially the issue is that we created a system where there's a fee to have the sign in the right-of-way, and then there's a fee for the sign itself, and that comes up to $344 annually for that sign in the right-of-way. There was a feeling that is out of line with other costs throughout the region, and so my recommendation would be, as we work through this, is that maybe we could separate the A-frame issue, which is related to a business, versus the banners that are in the right-of-way. When you're talking about public works staff needing to go out there, take them up, take them down, manage that, I think that the fees associated with that are reasonable, and we didn't hear much concern about that. We heard more concern about the right-of-way fee and the A-frame sign cost. Okay. So that's what we're going to focus on tonight, unless you'd like to look at other things.
Laura Turway, planner with the City of Oregon City. So these are the 3 types of signage that we have allowed within our new proposed sign code, which will be effective November 1st of this year. Focusing on A-frame signs in the right-of-way, the question is if permits are required or not. They are not required in any residential zone, and they are also not required if they're on private property. They may be required if they're in non-residential zones. So this very colorful chart tells you based on which time you're putting the sign out in the sidewalk in the public right-of-way if you need a permit or not. So you could own a business and put a sign out during the times that are identified in red and not need a permit. If you put out a sign in the times identified in green, you would need a permit for those signs. So the fees associated with it, when you place something in the right-of-way, you'll need a right-of-way permit, and then you'll also need a sign permit. So rather than require each sign have its own right-of-way permit, we thought we would save people some money by doing an annual right-of-way permit. When you have an annual right-of-way permit, each applicant can have as many permits associated with that for signs as they want. So if I'm a farmer's market, I have one right-of-way permit, and I have, 50 sign permits for various signs, whether they're signs on light posts or A-frames or cross-street banners throughout the year. Then December 31st comes up, all those expire, we start over again. So the fees are listed on the screen there. It's $20 per banner. The A-frame sign is a bit more expensive, $172 or half off if you submit after the second half of the year. And then there's a fee also for those cross-street banners in the two locations. The fees are different for the two locations because they're based off the cost that it takes Public Works to put the signs up. One is a little bit easier to hang over, and the other one they need to stop traffic and hang a sign. So focusing on just signs in the right-of-way permit, it's the pedestrian bridge over on Highway 99 East, so they can just walk over the top and kind of hang it off the top.
You see on the Oregon Territory across a little farther down.
Yeah, okay.
So here's some examples of how that permit fee might play out over the year. So if you have one A-frame sign in the right-of-way, that's where you're looking at the cost of $344, which is less than $1 a day. And then as you get more, it sort of becomes cheaper per sign. So there are a couple of combinations there. How do we compare to other jurisdictions? We're a lot higher than other jurisdictions. There's a lot of places where no permits are required, but also most of those jurisdictions don't allow them to be placed out as often as we do either. And that was our theory for not requiring a permit for residential. It's only allowed within certain time districts, so that's why there's no permit required for that. As far as a permit fee, it's sort of all over the board. Some people have the permit fee that's valid for the life of the sign, others are by year or multiple years. So, if we would like to change how we fee signs in the right-of-way, here's a suggestions for a couple of options. We can change the duration of the permit. Right now it's annual. We like the annual because then you can get changes of different signs. You don't have the same one there forever. Plus, we check back every year and make sure it's still complying with whatever our code is. If we change our code, then that sign would have to be updated with the most current code. You can also change the price of the permit if you like. We adopted the fee by resolution, so we can easily change it if we need to. Or you can remove the right-of-way permit, since again you'll need the right-of-way permit and you also need a sign permit. If you want to sort of couple those into a one-type permit, we can also do that too. That is the end of my presentation. So
thank you.
However you would like us to proceed, we can rewrite things and come back to you with a resolution or an ordinance or whatever it is we need. Also, we did visit every non-residential site in the city, and we created a bunch of pamphlets for signs in the right-of-way, both in residential or commercial. We have one in Spanish as well, and so we have completed that part.
And we've heard back from several people, including a particular hat person on Main Street. I'm going to turn this one over to Commissioner Mengelberg, since she is an economic development person in Canby, and maybe you can give us a little bit of insight.
Canby did have an A-frame program in downtown Canby as part of their Main Street program, and they actually provided the A-frame sign, and it had the Main Street logo on it, and then the business could provide the center content of it. And they subsidized that cost, and so I think the total cost of the business was, I don't know, between $50 and $100, and they had to pay for the center part of the sign. Over time, feedback from pedestrians was that it started to look cluttered. It started to be a tripping hazard. You know, the merchants loved it because it's one more way to get their word out. But some of them resented having to haul them in and out every night. So after a while, we discontinued the program because of feedback and the hassle involved, and tried to promote a blade sign program in our main street. And so far, we haven't had a lot of businesses take advantage of the grant program, but the thinking was that blade signs were more permanent, and they have a lot of character, and they're more attractive, and they're not a tripping hazard and a visual clutter nuisance. So that's the Canby
But are
story.
A-frames legal in Canby?
They are discouraged.
Okay. Anybody else?
I'd like to hear from Main Street here and see what you want to do, Carol.
We don't want to drag this kicking and screaming into this thing, so.
I want to thank Tony for being responsive to input and taking a look at the fee structure again. We did talk a lot about the sign code, but not so much the fee structure. And I think it wasn't evident to a lot of people that basically the A-frames are going to be double charged, and that is how it's perceived. And you did see the slide showing the rates for other cities, and I realize our other rates are different than other cities, so it's not just point blank like that. But the fact is A-frames haven't been allowed, but people have had them anyway. And there's been the perception that they were allowed. People didn't really know that. There's miscommunication. So you go from not having to pay to $344 a year. It's a lot for a business to absorb, and there are a lot of businesses that haven't had the money maybe to do a nice blade sign. So this is all they have, and it's self-policing. It's different than the other signs on the poles and over the streets that requires public works. This doesn't. This just requires the business owner to take it in and take it out. By having it in the sign code, it allows us as a city to make sure that there are standards met, which I think are very good, to make sure that it's not cluttered and to make sure there's some sort of consistency or at least some sort of standards. So I think it's a good thing. I think the fee is out of line. I would like to see it be one fee because I do think sandwich boards are different. I think they're very different than ones that are put on the banner, something where the public owns the flag poles and the light poles. So that's my input. I've heard a lot of input, and it's not from a particular person. It's from the business community as a whole. And it's from the small shops that really rely on those signs to say, hey, we're open. Sometimes the sandwich board is all that the business has to really show that they're open and that they're live. And also, we had on downtown, when it was Main Street, we did have Metro workshops. And they came in and they showed about how to enliven up your streetscape. And you see this in a lot of the neat little trendy neighborhoods like Hawthorne and Belmont. And it can become a real art piece too. It can enhance. And there are things that the Downtown Association can do to try to encourage that too. We're looking at micro grants right now. We could have a micro grant maybe as well for blade signs as well as A-frames. So there are things that we feel that we could partner with the city and do to actually enhance it and make it affordable.
So my 2 cents is I agree with Commissioner Pauly. I think going from a max of like $70 in one city and we're at 344, that seems I don't mind being near the top, but when we're 200% over everybody else, it might be a little excessive. So I think if you go back, take a look at it, see if we can get a way to get it down to something reasonably comparative to the larger cities around us, and bring us back a number.
Okay. I think my recommendation would be, right now we have a base fee, and that's what created the sign fee, and it was the $174. And then what we would typically do if it was on private property we charge 0.005% of the construction cost on top of that. That's where the 174 came from. One proposal would be to just do away with the right-of-way, the additional 174, and just leave it at the 174. That would still put us above the 150 total for Milwaukee for the life of the sign. So you'd be looking at that, adjusted for inflation. So I guess I'm just, is that, in your opinion, is that too high? Or are you looking for something lower than that or higher or?
Well, I think if you're talking about, valid for the life of the sign, what does that mean? I mean, right. When does the sign die?
Right, and it leads to the non-conforming issues that we have.
So I think basically for me, if we're talking about having an annual fee, it needs to be something that is reasonable, and I think reasonable is somewhere around $50 or $60. As a small business person, we were looking at A-frames, and I was surprised just how expensive the stupid sign is.
It is.
I mean, it's close to $150 just for the sign without any graphics on it. So, those are all. It doesn't seem like a lot, but if you're paying $1,000 a month in rent, and you're maybe taking in $1,600 or $1,700 in revenue, all of those little things matter, and you still got to take something home at the end of the month. So, I think that the reason for the permit or the reason for the fee is to, at least for the A-frames, is to cover at least as close as we can, cover the basic cost of going out and enforcing that piece of the code. And I think that, we have enough people who are willing to talk to us on the phone or write us letters that they will self-police that one way or the other. Mm-hmm. Either they'll go talk to their neighboring business, or they're going to send me or one of these guys a nastygram and tell on their neighbor. So either way, we're going to find out about it. So I think we can get that down to something that is not burdensome on the small businesses.
Yeah.
Mr. Shaw.
So we've spent a lot of time and effort on a right-of-way program in this city. So we got to make sure that there's some part of that fee is going towards right-of-way, so there's nobody left out that's using our right-of-way, whether it's county, city, A-frame, whatever. I still think part of that fee should be recognized as using that right-of-way, so nobody's exclusive of that.
Do you have an
I'll just say it's $60. We're certainly not going to come anywhere near even just covering our costs to issue the permit.
Right.
So we will come back with a number.
Okay.
Understand exactly where you're coming from. I think I hear maybe consensus across the board. And
I think if you charge at least some reasonable fee, I think the $50, $60 is kind of in the reasonable ballpark. It gives you the opportunity also to police the bad actors and have some standards so that they don't become a visual blight.
And we've also determined in the code that, this was sort of a test program, that we were going to see how it worked out over the next couple of years, and if it becomes a problem, we still have the ability to change the code and say, okay, we're not going to allow A-frames, or we're going to, maybe if it does become a real visual blight issue, maybe we go back to the $350 a year or whatever it is, so that people will do what they're supposed to do. Right now, I say we give the little folks a chance.
Yeah, and one fee. And I think this does go a lot to creating awareness, and our partners like the Chamber of Commerce and the Downtown Association can certainly help in this too, and help in, letting people know the standards and trying to promote high standards for A-frames as well.
You have clear direction, Mr. Conkle?
I do. I just, I hope that, at the cost of that permit, the investment in the sign may not be what you would get at a higher fee. And so we may, I hope that there is self-policing. I think that we may be, difference between $0 and $50. We may see the issues that we've had now with the quality of some of the signage. Hopefully we self-police through the education process, and we'll just deal with it if we have to.
Are there actual design standards for the A-frame signs in the code? Okay, then,
It's a lot better than what we have now, which is nothing, which is what we've had in the past, which was
all right.
nothing.
So with that, We are done with our stuff. Mr. Manager, you have anything to report?
I do not have any